Saanich North and the Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and rise to continue the debate here at third reading on Bill 10. And I recognize, Mr. Speaker, that we've had a protracted experience here with this bill, and it is an important discussion that we're having in this province right now, and that we're having in this House on behalf of the people of this province. And I'm speaking today at third reading. Well, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, I'm speaking today at third reading to ask my colleagues to reconsider. And they voted some dozen times on this bill, and that is a unique situation in which I and my colleagues from Cowichan Valley and from Oak Bay Gordon Head have asked for the members of this place to vote numerous times on this bill because of the importance of the decision that we're making. And during the second reading debate of this, I raised some very substantive issues around climate change. I discussed the deep concerns that I had with adding the single largest point of emissions in British Columbia, or indeed in Canadian context, to a situation in which we've been told very clearly we can't add more emissions. We have to, indeed, we have to find ways to reverse the situation that we have. We have to find ways to reduce the amount of emissions. I highlighted the power of our youth with the youth climate strike that we see on the very steps of this legislature and legislative and parliament buildings around the world, the youth standing up and asking their legislators to make different decisions than the decisions that we have in front of us, and that we collectively, or this House collectively, aside from three Greens, have made nearly a dozen times now on this bill. I and my colleagues moved 3 amendments at the second reading stage of this debate. We've called division at every single section of this bill, and we've been very deliberate in that because we're asking our colleagues in this place to consider the impact that this decision is having. And so I get to here at third reading and speaking to the bill that we have in front of us. And I reflect back on the committee stage of this legislation. I mentioned this in my comments to the amendment moved by my colleague from Oak Bay Gordon Head, and talk a little bit more about it now. But the reality is that as we moved section by section through this bill, the members of the official opposition, some folks that have been in this place for a very, very long time, extremely skilled legislators, pulled apart this legislation with the questions that they asked in fine detail, and did an incredible job of highlighting the substantive challenges that this bill has. And that is the role of the committee stage of this bill. And it's the role of the official opposition to deconstruct the bill that we have so that indeed British Columbians, and we do this on behalf of British Columbians, so that indeed British Columbians can be certain about the legislation that this House is passing on their behalf, that we can be certain about the kind of future that this House is locking not only us as current legislators, but future legislators. Indeed, the impact of this bill is going to impact the operations of this place for decades to come, 4 decades to come, as has been pointed out. And so I raise my hands to the member from Abbotsford West, the member from Langley East, the member from Surrey White Rock, I believe it's Surrey White Rock, because they've done a tremendous job, and Oak Bay Gordon Head, they've done a tremendous job of highlighting the substantive issues that we are now faced with voting on here at third reading in this bill. the issues that were not responded to clearly in the responses. And so I want to raise my hands to the work that was done, and I want to highlight very clearly that going through the papers, going through the debate that happened here at committee stage, I'm frankly shocked and disappointed with the quality of the responses that were given to the questions that were asked. The questions around temporary foreign workers, or the lack of responses given to very substantive questions about agreements that may or may not have been signed, and suggestions that we have to go outside of this debate. We have to go outside of the debate at committee stage into a different room to find out information that should be forthcoming in this debate at this time, so that when we're voting on third reading of this bill, when we're taking the time to pass this legislation, that we can be certain that we know that indeed the commitments that were made by this government, the commitments to meeting climate targets, the commitments to jobs for British Columbians, the commitments to real partnerships with First Nations, the commitments to fair return for British Columbians, these 4 conditions that were pushed forward by this government, that at third reading here, that this bill, we have been satisfied through this debate. And I could say I'm left with little satisfaction that indeed the good questions that were asked, that any answers were given. There was indeed responses, but they left a lot to be desired for. And you know, we've been critical of this legislation, this bill, all aspects of this bill, whether it be the natural gas tax credits, or the changes in the calculations, the cost of natural gas calculations, the administrative penalties, the natural gas sampling aspects of this bill that are all the way through, that are highlighted in this bill. We've definitely been critical about the decision of government to proceed with an incentive to attract an industry which is adding 3.5 megatons of greenhouse gas emissions to a climate, to an environment that cannot withstand further emissions, but indeed, in order for us to be able to live up to our commitments for climate action, we need to be reducing. And so, from an environmental perspective, there's very clearly a challenge, and they were highlighted with the member from Oak Bay, Gordon Head, who stood a couple of times during the debate as I was reading through it last night, the debate at committee stage, with respect to the first condition of meeting our climate targets. The responses to those questions, the fact that we have to wait until June 30th for the Minister of the Environment to complete his consultations with industry, the fact that we have to wait for that time, or we have to canvass those questions with the Minister of the Environment in a different house at a different time, at a different section of the work that we do in this place at budget estimates, is really a troubling aspect of what's gone on in this House this week. The fact is that we have disconnected this information. We've disconnected the information about this bill and the benchmarks that are being set. I would imagine that probably LNG Canada is quite concerned about that. But I and my colleagues in the official opposition, and my colleagues here in the BC Green Caucus are also quite concerned about the fact that this has been disconnected, and that the information about those consultations, the information about the clean growth industrial incentives needs to be canvassed during budget estimates, should be deeply considering for all sides of this House. All 87 of us in this place should be very concerned that we're not being satisfied with those very substantive and, in fact, important questions as to the aspect of this agreement. One of the most frustrating parts through the documentation that I read last night was the interaction around temporary foreign workers, and the documentation that the member from Abbotsford West highlighted and brought to the awareness of the people of this place. And I thank him for that. We don't necessarily agree on a lot, but on this, I have to raise my hands to the work that was done yesterday with respect to finding the documentation that an agreement was signed that perhaps opens up LNG to accessing more temporary foreign workers. Indeed, we got it, and I know that that my colleague would like to speak to this a little bit more, but we got emails from people that are working in the area up there that own companies that are working on LNG, and they're very concerned that while their people are sitting idle, that folks are coming from all across the province to work up there and getting jobs before locals. So I know that there's more about that coming. But the fact that we have to go to the jobs, trades, and technology debate on estimates to get information about the temporary foreign workers contract that potentially the Minister of Jobs, Trades, and Technology signed, that's going on in a different room right now. It completely disconnected from the debate around Bill 10. That's going on in a different house. So we've had deflections on jobs, we had deflections on the Clean Growth Industrial Incentives Program, and so now what we have in front of us is Bill 10 that has survived dozens of votes during second reading, and all the way through, stage by stage, section by section, at committee stage. And we have a bill that survived all of that with very little information informing us as to what it is that we're actually voting on. And, you know, I've been around the local government, now the provincial government tables for a decade. There's nothing that drives me more crazy than when I'm sitting at these tables, looking across at the people around me and knowing that the homework wasn't done. And in some cases, the information was all in front of you. And that's really a frustrating experience when everybody around the table had access to all the information, and yet people were not reading their agendas and reading the briefings and reading the information. That's not the situation that we have here, Madam Speaker. The situation that we have here is the good work of my colleagues in the official opposition has been frustrated. The information that they tried to seek to get clarification, they were told in order to get it, you have to leave this house, go to another house, have a different discussion. It won't be on the record as part of the second reading and the committee stage debates. It's in fact not available to inform us about the decision that we're going to be asked to make. So when we had the decision in front of us as to whether or not we were going to indeed stand and debate at third reading, while we have stood at every opportunity to oppose this bill, it became very clear to me that indeed, yes, it's necessary to stand at third reading and have this debate. It's necessary to challenge the assumptions that have been made, the statements that have been made that, yes, trust us, we've met our climate targets. Well, how? We have a Clean BC program that's got 75% of the way there, meaning 25% of it, a quarter of it is yet to be identified. So how can we say that we've met it? The benchmarks for the clean growth, industrial incentive, they've not been yet set. We have until June the 30th in order for those to be set. So we're being asked, and members on all sides of this House are being asked to vote on a bill which, in fact, we don't actually have all of the information from. So in some respects, you know, I think that the frustration around the table when I could identify that my colleagues had not done the homework that was in front of them, you know, I can set that aside for this debate. What I can't set aside for this debate is that we are about to vote in favor of a bill, or we are not, but the majority, the vast majority of the people of this place are going to vote for a bill in which the information has not been made available. I ask, how can we possibly turn and say to British Columbians that yes, we've done a responsible job if in fact we haven't taken the time to ensure that the information is in front. And that's the reason why, at this stage, I'm going to be moving a hoist amendment to this bill, because I believe that, in fact, there is an opportunity for us to be informed. And I admit, in the hoist amendment, I'm going to be moving the hoist amendment because I think that we have the opportunity to get the information. We have the opportunity to be able to ask the questions that need to be asked if there's more time, and to get the answers to the questions that have been asked that have been left unanswered. So that, and I'm not asking for even necessarily that I be satisfied. I've got quite strong opinions about the direction that we need to be taking on LNG, and I know that's not lost on any of my colleagues in this House. And I recognize that I may not be satisfied on this, but I think that there are members of this place that are far from satisfied with the answers that they've been given. And so I ask them to stand with us and take this opportunity to delete, and so I'll move this amendment, that the motion for third reading of Bill 10, entitled the Income Tax Amendment Act 2019, be amended by deleting the word now and substituting 6 months hence.
Thank you, member. Please proceed with your remarks on the amendment.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have had the opportunity to speak now a couple of times here at third reading to the amendment moved by my colleague from Oak Bay Gordon Head, and then now to my comments at third reading. And I've been quite clear that I feel that there's been substantive questions raised. And the challenge that I would like to lay down here for all of my colleagues in this place is, if we were to set aside the politics of this and look at it from just a business perspective, would we be entering into providing these tax breaks for, and I recognize that the Minister of Finance has been saying that this is a long conversation that's been happening. And I would like to say that the long conversation that's been happening has been outside of this place, for the most part. It's only been the last couple of weeks that the long conversation has been happening in this place. And the people of British Columbia deserve to have these questions answered on the record. And they deserve to have these questions answered on the record in light of the fact that we are committing them to 40 years. 40 years, 4 decades. I am 43 years old, I think. I might be something, I might be just close to that. I'm just wondering, how old am I? Anyway, the point that I'm making is that it's my lifespan, essentially. Can't even do math for his own. The point that I'm making is that it's my lifespan that we're committing to, and a lot has changed in my lifespan. I remember my mom was debating as the PAC chair as to whether or not those first Apple IIes should be, whether we should just agree to the Apple IIes that they were offering to our school for free. I mean, that's a long, long time ago that we were having that debate. A lot has changed. A lot has happened. Do we really want to be leaving these gaps open? You know, and this is a long conversation. This is a long conversation that we've had. Indeed, the members across the way in the official opposition started this conversation a long time ago. The depth of knowledge that the member from Langley East demonstrated yesterday in his questioning of the Minister of Finance was substantive. That conversation has been going on a long time. So I ask the members across the way, in light of the fact that we've gone this distance, in light of the fact that we have a final investment decision that has been made with so many questions left unanswered, that I think that we owe it to the corporate interest that's made this agreement to us that we seek those answers out and get them for them and for the people of British Columbia. Primarily, that's the most important group that I'm responsible for standing up for, with the people of British Columbia. But that I asked the question, what is 6 months? Is it, you know, if in fact this is everything that it's being said that it is, then we should pay the respect to the people of British Columbia to seek out that information. And those questions were good questions. The answers left a lot to be desired for. And so, to me, I believe that there is a really good case to be made here. We are not going to be able to get the information around the temporary foreign workers and just exactly how many jobs are going to be British Columbian jobs, how many jobs are going to be coming from outside this jurisdiction. Indeed, we're not going to be able to get the answers about the clean growth industrial incentive until at least June 30th of 2019. Even as long as December 31st was the answer given by the Minister of Finance. So I think actually that there is a very good case to be made. And this is my last opportunity to speak to this bill. So I'll just leave it at this. I place the challenge in front of my colleagues. I place this challenge in front of them. Do they want to be able to say that, yes, in fact, we have supported a good deal? If so, then we have the responsibility to make sure that we have all the information to be able to say that. The case becomes extremely weakened when the points have been made that, in fact, we don't have all the information, and yet we vote for it anyway. And so I ask my colleagues to really deeply take this time to consider the fact that we have not been given answers to the questions that we've asked, and that we have an opportunity right now. We have an opportunity right now to take the 6 months, to reconsider this in 6 months, and to say, yeah, you know what, member from Saanich North and the Islands, we did get the answers. You might not like them, but we got the answers. And I think that that's a worthwhile endeavor, to make sure for the next 4 decades we're able to say to the people of British Columbia, yeah, we did the work, and we didn't just do the work in the back rooms here. We did the work where it's supposed to happen, in front of under the lights, in front of the cameras, on the record, in Hansard, so that you can actually go and see the information. Because right now, I'll tell you, the information that's on Hansard, I would imagine is going to cause British Columbians some deep, deep concern. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak to this, and thank you to the members of this House for listening.